our relationship with money. And this weekend, my wife and I are at this conference called Women Doing It Big in Phoenix. And there was a lady, I didn't tell you about this, man, but there was a lady who came up to me and was talking about the speech I gave. And she said, I now have a different relationship with money. And, we talked about that. And she was talking about how she, hearing the speech led her to question a lot of her assumptions as it pertains to money and a lot of the psychology behind how she was introduced to money and the struggle that she thought that she had to go through in order to make any money. So that let me know that there are some people that are listening and that are trying to grow. And so that's really it. So you had an assessment, and we sent the assessment out. I know you worked really hard to put together this great workbook and an assessment on financial anxiety to kind of help us figure out where we stand on that whole spectrum. Now, what I'm going to try to do is put a link in here for anybody that didn't get the assessment. Some of you may have done the assessment already. Put a yes if you have done the assessment, if you filled it out. If you haven't, we can kind of talk you through it so that when you do get a chance to fill it out, you'll be able to determine whether or not you might struggle with financial anxiety. Abel says yes. Bertha says yes. Okay, good. So this stuff is important. These are some significant mental health challenges that a lot of us might face. If you quit your job and you're scared of what's going to happen, so maybe you never start that business because the fear is crippling. I think that will be a type of financial anxiety. Or if you make an investment in the stock market and you start losing money, and then you just give up because you think the stock market is for suckers and losers and people that want to go broke. Well, that might be a type of financial anxiety, and financial anxiety can be very crippling because when it comes to doing things like making investments, growing your wealth, building businesses, you have to have some sort of healthy way to view risk, a healthy way to view your financial challenges, healthy way to process your trauma, et cetera. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to let my wife kind of take over. And babe, if you want to even start with your slides, you can, or add to what I just said, because I know I just said a lot. Please go ahead.
No, I mean, everything you say makes perfect sense to me. I think that everything is just so tied into, how love and money. I mean, it's just, these are like the number two key issues that all of us grapple with. And I, by no means, although I would consider myself an expert, definitely in the area of relationships. But even myself, I can make mistakes, and I'm a student and I'm always learning from other people. I'm always researching. I'm always reading articles to figure out a way to make it the best way possible it can be, particularly in my relationships, because it's so important to me. And the way we deal with money is so intricately involved. Every single story I hear, even today, yesterday at the conference, some lady, she came up to me and she went all into the story about finances and her relationships and her marriage and making decisions and whether to retire or not to retire. All of these things are so tied up together. Even in business partnerships, we have business meetings all the time, boys, and we're trying to make decisions. Who do we collaborate with? Who do we hire for this? Is this a really good decision? Are they asking for too much money? Can we really trust them to follow through with what they're doing? And I think it's just you always need to recalibrate and you need to reset, and you have to always refocus and gather information. And it takes a calm, still mind. And I think that is my goal for everybody when you leave this masterclass, to know the importance of making these decisions with a calm mind. Because when you make decisions and you're feeling all anxious and you're all worried about, you don't make the best decisions. You're making it based on the immediate right now, when there's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. And so many of us can prevent ourselves from making regrettable choices in our lives just by being able to stop and think and meditate and process and talk to other people so that you can make the best decisions for your family. And I think that's what I'd like to have everybody to be able to grasp, that when they're done with this class in the next month or so, when you're done with this class, that's my hope. Yes.
Sorry, I muted myself because I thought you were going to go ahead and just jump right into it.
Okay.
But yeah, because I know you made a lot of slides. Just so y'all know, Dr. Alicia, I married a workhorse. This lady is a workhorse. She was going through all different kinds of psychological theory and the relationships between love and money, and relationships and money, and family and money. And so she's quick to put together assessments and slides and workbooks, and all this stuff is available to you if you log in. You just go to loveandmoneymasterclass.com, or you can also find it on my website, boycewatkins.com. If you log in use your login, all those assessments, all those slides, all the recordings are there, and they belong to you for life. And this will help you to really shape your mind in a way that will open that door for abundance and prosperity. I was just talking today about how a lot of our families when they struggle building wealth, just from basic things like not being able to necessarily work together, or traumatizing each other, not being able to trust each other, things like that. And that's really what the goal of this is. So last week we did some slides. Again, if you log in, just log in at loveandmoneymasterclass.com. Those slides are available, as well as the assessment. And then this week, these slides will be available, as well as this recording after we're done. So go ahead, babe.
Okay. Well, welcome to session 2 of the Black Family Wealth Love and Money Masterclass, taught by myself, Alicia Watkins. That's my name. And of course, Boyce Watkins is also my co-teacher here. What I'd like to do today, though, I would like to recap from session 1, just so that we can kind of button that up really nicely. There's way more slides than we could ever even go through in a setting, but I wanted to make sure that you had all the information that you may have needed in terms of finances and relationships and all of that at your purview. So way more slides than we could ever go through, but I wanted to make sure that the information was in there. So I want to recap. I want to then talk about emotions, because emotions is really big. And so a lot of you all did have a chance to complete much of the workbook. And so those self-assessments will help you to be able to know how well you are at regulating your emotions, and how it relates to decisions that you make in relationships and with your money. So we will review those self-assessments. I'd like for us to reflect on something that you've learned about yourself and what you've noticed about yourself in this process. If you haven't been able to complete all of the assessments, as much as you can, try to work on it. Maybe we'll give, if there's anybody, say no if you haven't had a chance to complete any of them. Maybe perhaps what we'll do, we'll give you a few minutes to kind of wrap up and to kind of complete a lot of them. We'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll go into question and answer. So that's how I kind of see us with today's session. I just wanted to talk to you about next time that we meet. So we are coming up on Christmas, on the holidays. So these 2 weeks, and I know, Boyce, I sent you the dates like a while ago about when we'll meet. So today we're going to meet and talk about assessments. Next week is when I meet with your prime students, Boyce. So I didn't know, I want to talk about, because we're going into the holiday season, I'm going to do a special session on spending, overspending, and how to avoid overspending. And I'm going to talk about that next week. I think that is the 18th, so that's the week before the holiday. I want to talk about that. And then we will take a 2-week break for the holiday. And session 3 is going to be January, I want to say January 8th. Let me look on my phone just to be clear. So January 8th, because the 1st is January 1st, and I'm probably not going to be, we won't meet on the 1st of January, but, and we won't meet on Christmas. So, but January 8th will be when we have session 3. And then our final session will be January 15th. So, on the 8th, session number 3. So make sure that you have, that'll give you about 2.5, 3 weeks to complete the workbook. Be sure to complete that workbook by then if you haven't, and think about it and reflect on it, because on the 8th, I'm going to talk about healing. and I'm going to talk about treatment, and I'll talk about, we'll do, I will have Dr. Boyce send out some exercises for you all to do regarding healing, but session number 3 is going to focus on healing, and I would love for us to have some tools to take away so that we can kind of process what we've gone through in terms of finances, and I'd like for us to come on the other side of this class knowing for sure how to make those clear decisions like I talked about earlier. So session 3 will be on the 8th of January. It's going to be all about healing. It's all about treatment. It's all about intervention in that session. And then on the 15th, part of what we promised you was coming up with your own plan. Like now that you're aware, so the first session is a psychoeducational approach. It's just becoming aware of how these things are connected. Today, you're going to be able to be self-aware about how these things are connected. Next week, we're going to talk about healing. And then on our last session, I would love for us to talk about a plan for going forward so that when you're done with this class, you will know exactly where you are. And then Boyce will probably be taking the helm in that last session. And of course, we will always be open for question and answers. Boyce, do you want to add anything or talk about that? That plan sounds good. I emailed it.
The plan sounds great. So let's just dive into it. Let's
Okay.
go hard and start digging in, because I want to dig into this, and I want to sort of, what I can do is kind of take some of what Dr. Alicia hits on, and I will connect it to the things that I know from talking to you all, what you're sort of thinking about and you're concerned about. So just focusing on in terms of what's happening right now. And I know some of you are in the Prime program, some of you signed up specifically for this class. And in case you're ever wondering who's in this class, it's really sort of a mixture of different students from the Black Business School. Some of you have access to all the recordings and all the slides and everything else because you're in the class. Some of you don't, but if you'd like to get access, I can give you that link by the time we're done, if you want to go back through some of the stuff that we've done or some of the things we're going to do in the future. But in general, what I wanted to dive in today was you talked about financial anxiety. And I think that digging into that, like that's the thing I'm really curious about, because I know that you talked about how the majority of Black people struggle with anxiety, or a lot of people struggle with anxiety or depression. And I remember you telling me that anxiety and depression go hand in hand. So has anybody ever gone through that where you were nervous about something, and then maybe because you were so nervous, you just felt just depressed about it, or maybe you felt a depression that made you anxious to go into social settings or to make the next move, or you were so nervous about making a decision that you just didn't make one, things like that. That's what I think about. And so I'd be curious to know, I know you're jumping into a psychosocial approach. It looks okay. Willetta says yes currently. And I'd be curious to learn sort of that background. I know that you have the factors that contribute to longevity and long life, but I also saw where things like anxiety and depression can actually shrink your life. They can actually make your life shorter, or racism that we deal with, microaggressions on the job can make your life shorter. So did you want to hop into your slide and kind of talk about what you have here?
Oh, no, I mean, what you're saying it makes perfect sense. I mean, we, from the social work perspective, from understanding the person and why and how they make decisions, your family and you as an individual, it's interconnected. So you just mentioned quite a few factors here. You mentioned the stock market, you mentioned the economy, you mentioned family, you mentioned community, you mentioned culture, you mentioned voice. You talk about all of these things, but I think the psychosocial approach kind of pulls all of those factors in on one sort of big umbrella to explain. So in order to understand why and how somebody may have anxiety around finances, you have to see how all these different parts are integrated together. So when you want to talk about anxiety, you have to talk about all these different systems that are coming together. The biological system. We know that anxiety is hereditary, right? So anxiety is part of it, is this biological system that comes together, and it's your genetics. And I'm talking about genetics like they do studies with twins, and one twin, identical twin, will go and be adopted in one family, another twin will be adopted in a separate family. So it's controlling for all the environmental factors. Just looking at biological, both twins will have anxiety just like their parents do. So we know that it is, a lot of the stuff is genetic, it's biological, and it has a lot to do with your lifestyle, and it has to do with all of these things that has a big impact. So when we're talking about human behavior and why and how somebody could be very anxious, we do need to look at how well you're sleeping, right? Boyce did a podcast on sleep, the importance of sleep. That has a lot to do with anxiety. You don't have enough sleep and you're not making good decisions in anywhere in your life, not even just financially. So getting enough exercise, we go running all the time. That's how I deal with stress in your life. For those of you who scored really high on the stress scores in your book. So in the workbook, everything, has to do with that. Also, if you're using substance, if you're using drugs or alcohol to cope with things, all of that has an impact. Also, you look at the psychological or the spiritual system, that has to do with whether you're going to make sound decisions in your life, particularly finances and how you are with other people. Sometimes some people are very insightful. Some people are just real insightful and very self-aware of things. Those people who aren't very insightful, they also have anxiety, right? So life experiences, sometimes just how you grew up has a big, impact on how you see money and how you see finances. And also the societal system, cultural, how old are you, historical events that's happened in your life. What type of culture do you subscribe to? That has a big impact on how you spend money and what you see as valuable. All of these things together, not one of these things separately, all of these things together explain your behavior, human behavior, and the way you act. There's no single factor to account for why you may have financial anxiety, why you may have issues in any other way. Not one single factor accounts for that. It's all of these things intermixed together. Boyce, did you want to have comment on that?
No. If you wanted to jump to that next slide, you can. And while you do that, I'll just say that, I think that as an individual, I've always tried to look at, separate the systematic factors, meaning the things that I can't control from the things I can control.
Yeah.
In our family, our culture was very much built on personal responsibility. We're big believers in that. And that means that you might have the public policy that's bad. You might have the bad community situation. You might have a tough organizational scenario. But then the question becomes, what are you going to do? What are the factors that you can determine and control? So when you talk about wealth building, I look at it like this. I've met a lot of racist white men in my life, but I've never met a racist white man who kept me from reading a book. There's never been a white man who's ever stopped me from reading a book. There's never been a white man who's ever stopped me from starting a business. I've never been a white man that ever stopped me from, they've forced me to eat Popeye's chicken or unhealthy food, so I think
some of that is economic too, because
right.
Some people live in neighborhoods that they can afford, and there's some neighborhoods that are just food deserts. They're just like not a lot of viable fruits and vegetables, and it's easy to say, well, you're not eating fruits and vegetables, there's something wrong with you as a person, as an individual. And so some of it could be, public transportation isn't good. You don't have those sort of resources to get where you need to be. Maybe you need to organize your community so that we're interdependent. And so, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with just being personal, having a personal responsibility, but I think it's important to see how that plays into all of these other things that come together. And so policies and community and all of these things have an impact on your behavior. And I think it's important that we deconstruct a lot of that, because some of it is personal responsibility. Some of it are the decisions that you make, the choices that you make, but then some of it is also structural. And so I think that's why I like this approach, because if you look at your finances and where you are, a lot of it is what family you're born into. A lot of it is the time that you were born. A lot of that has an impact.
Okay, so next time I'm going to teach you, because next time you got to let me finish my point.
Go ahead. I thought you were done.
The agreement me and Alicia made before was that when I was sharing my perspective, she'd give me a good 2-3 minutes to make my point, and then I give her 10 minutes to go through the slides. So that's how we're going to do it, because sometimes she and I don't see everything the same. I learned from social workers, but I'm not a social worker, right? But I need to hear from social workers, because one of the biases that came from me growing up in a family that was built on personal responsibility is that sometimes we might underestimate the impact that the system might have on personal choices, right? So I've always told you guys that I think balance is always the key in terms of understanding, both perspectives. And there are times where systematic factors, broader factors do play a part, in individual choices. So for example, when we talk about why BET should not promote certain kinds of music that promotes drug addiction to kids, there are people who will say, oh, well, it's up to the parents. The parents should stop their kids from listening to the music. And I've said, yeah, but there are many parents who try their best to stop their kids from hearing the music. But because you are systematically marketing this music to our kids, it's going to still penetrate, even beyond individual choices, right? So ultimately, I would say that that awareness of what's around you, awareness of your environment, is a good step in learning the difference between that one important line I mentioned to you guys earlier. What can you control and what can you not control, right? And that's really it. So because believe me, I grew up with a lot of poverty. I remember not having enough money to do certain things. My mother was a 17-year-old single mother in a very poor neighborhood when she gave birth to me. So a lot of you in here know poverty, right? And the question is, why is it that you have two people live in the same food desert, same poor neighborhood, same broken family, and they make different choices, And so I think that to me is one of the variables that I would like to uncover, so that when you're in those situations where you have opportunities, you're able to see them and take advantage of them, and you're not going to allow some false belief that you have no control over your destiny to stop you from moving forward. I've seen people that do that. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You've seen people where you can give them every opportunity in the world, but because they were convinced, oh, it's the system, oh, it's the government, oh, the politicians are never going to help me, or the school system's never going to do this for me. When they get the opportunity, they throw it away because they've been trained to believe that they are completely helpless. And I don't want you all to have that. That's not why you're here. You're not here to be told that you're helpless. You're here to figure out how you can actually be helpful to yourself. So go ahead.
I really love that. I really love that. And it tells us that there's no single cause. What you're talking about is what we talk about when we say resilient. There are people who are very resilient, and and we know there's a lot of information out about resilience. There's a lot of reasons why an individual would overcome all of these barriers. Like, how did you get where you are? And so it's multifaceted, right? So I think this is interesting because I got this slide. This slide was created with my dad. He used to talk about, he taught this, he was a policy instructor. And, he talks about macro level influences on the lives of individuals. But, just being poor, it's environmental and it's personal, right? And so there's several examples here. Some people would say, okay, you're just lazy. That's why you're poor. But what if you were born in a rich family? You can be lazy and not be poor at all. So, I mean, that's just an example of how there's the interaction of all of these different multiple factors that looks at poverty. And these are examples here. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I do want to get into emotions, but did you have anything you wanted to add? I'm looking at this. Okay. And so here is another way of looking at it in terms of your household. So there's a husband and wife. You look at how the marriage quality, the quality of your marriage, and all of these other interactions between those who are in relationships, that is intricately involved with what we look at is financial factors in a relationship, in a household. And so all of these other financial factors, how well you're managing money, how satisfied you are with your income, financial inputs, like how well do you know how things are coming in and out. All of these factors kind of play in and of itself. And we talked about this last week. This is part of the recap, was that all of these marital quality and how well you were able to manage finances in the household, they all have an interaction with each other, and they're very closely tied to each other. And all of these things sit primarily in the middle with all of the other external factors, that has to do, like the community, do you live in a close-knit community where people can kind of count on each other? Or do you live in a community where it's high levels of violence? Maybe you don't feel so safe, and so it isn't quite close-knit. Educational system, gender roles. What does this mean? Gender roles, ethnicity, economy, religious beliefs have a big impact on how you operate in your household and how you use your money, right? All of these things have a big impact on that. So what this looks at, the reason why I love this finance theory is that it looks at all of these things together, and it says we need to start looking at household in terms of household functioning and how well people are emotionally, psychologically, financially, how intricately tied a lot of those things are. So that's just to kind of recap what we talked about last week. Okay, it's 1:30. That's about as much time as I gave myself. Did you want to comment on this before we go into emotions, boys?
No. What I'll do is I'll let you kind of do the science, and then what I'll do is I will, if I hear something that strikes my spidey senses, I'll jump in, and then also I will maybe provide some practical examples. So if any of it seems like a bit much to anybody, just be patient and feel free to put your question in the Q&A section. And what I'll do is I'll come in and kind of maybe relate it to some of the other things we've talked about in the Black Business School. And a big part of the reason we created the Black Financial Therapy Department in the Black Business School, and it's the first that we've ever seen anywhere, and we were recruiting therapists to participate in this because we think it's really important, is because we learned that psychology and culture are two of the big factors in terms of determining how wealthy you're going to be. Mindset is everything, and then mindset shifts culture and all this other stuff. And we really want you to be in tune with that. So our goal is to take the best research out there, break it down for you so you can understand it. We want you to bring your whole family to class. One membership to the class will you can bring the whole family with one membership. So that's why we're doing this. And then that way you will at least have an emotionally healthy environment so that you can not just have prosperity, but you minimize all the things that distract you from prosperity. So I'll let you go ahead, Dr. Alicia, and you can take over from here.
Yeah, I mean, emotion is very central. Thank you, boys. Emotion is very central to love and money. And it's just so interesting. Over and over again, we hear all of this information about how 80% of the decisions that you make in terms of your finances, how you spend your money, where you spend your money, when you spend your money, all of that has to do with emotions. And not only do, researchers know this, but advertisers know this all too well. They know how colors affect how you feel and your emotions, and that affects whether you spend or not, your spending ability, and all of that is those advertisements. Why would you buy McDonald's? Because you're loving it, right? Loving it. They're just telling you. Why would you buy Snickers? Because it's what you crave. So a lot of our spending power is based on emotions. And even in your personal life, I mean, by the way, I just want to say all healthy relationships are by no means perfect. So there's no perfect marriage, there's no perfect anything. Even in your business relationships, your friendships, romantic relationships, they all have their share of problems because conflict definitely is inevitable. And what we know that separates healthy relationships from unhealthy relationships is one thing that separates. That is how well you can control your emotions. And that has a big impact on how you handle and resolve conflict. So healthy relationships are able to recover very well from any of these challenges because you're able to get yourself together and you're able to handle that in a way that's helpful. So to aid in this, process, it's important to know the person that you're working with in your business relationships and your household relationships. And part of this knowledge is to have a clear understanding of what's going on with them. So not only do I think that you should complete this workbook, but I think you should give it to your significant other. I think you should give it to people who you're involved in business relationships. I think that you should, have people fill this out and really have conversations about, about who they are. This is a great way to get to know someone that you are interacting with on a daily basis. All of your relationships that you're in, this is a great way to get to know each other and have really meaningful conversations about this. And I think it'll aid in making sure that, number one, you have empathy, because you need to be able to understand the other person and see where they're coming from. Number two, you do need to be able to be flexible. Being flexible and solving problems, because remember, there's always going to be issues, there are always going to be problems, but this is important in finding common ground. This is important with compromise. And of course, the key is having a relaxed body. So we'll talk about relaxed body the next time that we meet. But anyway, I think interweaving money and relationships is just a dynamic process. And I think it's just really interesting in relationships, because people feel like, when you're entering into a relationship, like, how do you know, like, if this person makes more money, if the person that you're dating is making more money than you and you make less money, do both of you have equal share when it comes to making financial decisions in a business partnership? Usually the boss or the president, that takes precedence over when it comes to making decisions. And so, how are they able to, incorporate and listen to some of the people who have less power in the relationship, in the company? So a lot of this takes an impact. Money and power and making decisions and hurting people's feelings and all of this stuff is like so intricately involved in just being able to make sure that people feel worthy. And sometimes it's so interesting. Like, I've talked to so many men who say, I would love to approach this lady and date this lady, but I'm not going to because I don't feel like I have enough money. And I'm just like, what is that? Like, I want to make sure I get my money right before I even approach this woman. And I mean, they just don't feel like they're worthy because they're not able to contribute as much financially. They feel like that.
I'm going to hop in, and you can go to the next slide if you want to.
Okay.
But I was going to say that this weekend, if you go to my Instagram, in case you guys don't know, my Instagram is The Real Boyce Watkins, REAL, The Real Boyce Watkins. There's a picture of me and my wife, and then another picture that made people think that I was cheating on my wife, which is a picture with Lisa Ray.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they said, "Does Dr. Alicia know that you taking a picture with Lisa Ray?"
I do not care.
And the reason that I know, but the reason that I took that picture with Lisa Ray is because my wife and I went in and we sat with Lisa Ray last night. We were at this conference. It's called Women Doing It Big, and it was a lot of fun. We had a blast. Well, anyway, long story short, Lisa Ray, I remember Alicia last night when Lisa Ray was talking about what it takes to find a man. It was really an interesting conversation because, she was very open and vocal about, being single and saying that she was looking. She said she was looking, and it's interesting, right? When a person who is actually, if you want to, I can show. I'm gonna share for a second, babe. Do you mind? I want everybody to. Here's the picture, by the way, of me and Lisa Ray, right? So that's the picture in case y'all want to see it. So this was literally last night, and this is fun because I like to bring real life into the classroom. So with Lisa Ray, I remember her. Think about this, right? Here you have this lady. When I put her up on my Instagram, a lot of guys were like, "Oh, that's my dream girl," or "Oh, I've been dreaming about her since the 90s, right? Since she did Players Club." But think about this, right? So Lisa Ray is talking to us about, dating and men, and saying that she would like to be in a relationship, but she can't find a man, right? And that doesn't make sense, if you've got all these men that are just lusting after you. But then remember on stage, the host, Dr. Tiana Von Johnson, I think that's her name, was asking her something like, "So would you date a doctor who makes $100,000 a year?" She instantly said no. Do you remember that? Like she instantly said no. And she said, I wouldn't want to stress him out with my lifestyle. And so that pretty much was her way of saying, like, I spend so much money that, or it sounded to me, I interpret it as your little, $8,000 a month or whatever, because that's, if you take 100,000 divided by 12, that's 8,000 a month approximately. Your little $8,000 or $9,000 a month can't handle all of this, right? And I remember her having this list of these standards and expectations, and she even mentioned that she was married to a king or something before, whatever that was that she did. And it was interesting just hearing her basically describing just this insane expectation. Like, what kind of King Kong man is going to be able to meet all of this? And I've just seen that. I've seen that sometimes, and it's funny to me when money becomes just such an important part of the love equation. And I know that's very different from the way someone like yourself thinks. Like you seem to, sort of sway away from money. On the internet, the little rumor was that, oh, she married Dr. Bush for his money, and they have no idea. You don't care that much about money. So what do you think about that? I mean, is that even gonna ever, should that even fit in a relationship for someone to say, yeah, regular guys are nice, but they don't make enough money, I'm not interested, or whatever? Or is it just, a matter of preference and it's no big deal? I mean, how do you process that without telling somebody that what they're doing is wrong?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say that what she's doing is wrong. That's what she feels like she wants to do. I mean, I personally think that your financial position does not define who you are. I think, but at the same time, we all need to take pride in how we all got started in this journey. And but your position doesn't make you better than others who are less fortunate and can hang with my lifestyle. I think she's pinning herself into this sort of preconceived bubble, and I think she should try to open this up a little more personally. But we all have a different financial reality, and so that's up to her. If that's how she wants to live, then so be it. I mean, I can't I can't really tell her what to do. She feels like I guess she wants to date some Hollywood guy or another famous person. I don't know, but that's her. That's her. That is her. That's her idea of what it is. So anyway, I don't know. But she's a pretty woman, and so I don't see, why she wouldn't be able. I mean, I don't know why she wouldn't be able to. I don't know why she's single and can't find nobody. I don't know.
She meets a lot of men. She just hasn't met a perfect man, and I think that's.
Well, we were kind of talking. It was funny because my cousin and I, we both have significant others, and she was just like, and it's funny because you're somebody from my past, and my cousin's dating someone from her past, and she's just like, well, we both found somebody from our past, and I was like, maybe someone from your past will come around. She was like,
I remember that. That was another part of the conversation, because we talked to Lisa for a while, because it turns out Alicia's cousin knew her from way back in the day. When they were crazy Catholic schoolgirls. And and so we were sitting there talking for a minute, and I was really fascinated to hear the discussion, because you're right. We mentioned all out of the four of us, all of us were dating somebody from our past. And Lisa was the one who said, I would never date someone from my past. And I wanted to say to her, like, maybe you got a nice man sitting over there in the friend zone that you forgot about. But I'm not judging. I assume whatever she's doing is working for her. I do find that really interesting and fascinating. My theory also is that people have found a way to just exist without a relationship. Like, because I mentioned today when I was talking to Lene Javette, I said, I'm confused by this dichotomy, where you have on one hand, this interesting thing where I never understood why why some women, not all women, but some women really have an intense fear of being alone. Like being alone. Like if you say when Kevin Samuels said you're going to die alone, that was seen as a really horrible statement. Whereas a lot of men, if you say that to a man, I don't know, I've never been affected by it, but maybe I can't speak for everybody. But it's sort of like, okay, so there's this concern, like a desire to be in a relationship. Yet, I've talked to so many people that have like a long list of expectation, a long list of standards, like a big long list where every time I hear one of those lists, I'm like, I can't make that list. I talked to a 60-year-old lady on the airplane, beautiful lady, and she gave me her list of what she's looking for in her men. It had 10 items on it. And I was like, wow, and you're 60 and you're okay with that? You know, because I don't know any. She asked me if I had any friends. I said, I don't have no friends that can make that list. So it was, but what I think is that maybe what she's done in her life is the reason she can keep that standard is because maybe she's just found different ways to supplement different needs. Like maybe she's got 5 male friends, you know, one guy does one thing, one guy does another thing, one guy does another thing. And that's maybe just what she's actually living on until she finds the one man who can kind of do it all. I don't know. That's a new theory I formed.
I don't know. I don't think one person can ever give you everything there is to give. Like, I think, you know, there is some validity to the thought that we're putting too much emphasis on making sure that our one partner is everything to us. That you should be my best friend, you should be my travel buddy, you should be my confidant, you should be my exercise buddy, you should be my dinner buddy, you should be my movie friend, you should be, you know, all of these expectations we're putting on each other in a marriage. I think we could farm out some of that stuff. Like, I think that it's okay to, you know, join a book club and do some of these social things without your partner. I don't think when you do everything together, boys, we do a lot together. So we could farm out. It's okay to farm out some stuff together. So we transition to financial trauma. By the way, I think if I go back to the first one, the measure on Bowen. So let me stop sharing. Let me go to, before I go into financial trauma, I want to share the workbook so that you can see the measure that corresponds to that is this one. Will it take me right to it? Yeah. So this measure here in the self-assessment where it says emotion essential to healthy financial decisions, if you take Bowen's differentiation of self-inventory scale, this will tell you how well you're able to regulate your emotions in the middle of conflict, right? So, which is like the number one key issue. So if you can't take any other self-assessment in this workbook, the most important one is the Bowen. And if you look here and you add up your score, anybody who took this, can you tell us if you'd like to tell us your score for the Bowen? Did anyone make it down to Bowen? Let's open up the chat and see. Anybody take the Bowen? Put your score in here if you took it. Okay, so put your score in there. If you haven't taken it, maybe we'll give you some time to take it today. But wait, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, I put the link to the assessment in the chat earlier. I'll put it back in there again. But
okay.
Yeah, go ahead and talk through it, and then
okay.
And
so
then
I really do
think
I think this is really key because it's the demarcation between people who can have really good relationships with people and whether they aren't. And so if you can see, the higher the score, the more regulated you are with your emotions, and the lower the score, the less able you are to regulate